Hey guys, have you ever wondered why some people who seem to have kind of mediocre talent or like no talent at all are suddenly wildly successful and you're sort of sitting like trying to make ends meet and you feel like you're pretty talented? Well, there's actually a secret, and the secret is successful people tend to surround themselves with three kinds of people. Let's take a look and see what those kinds of people are. Alright, my name is Thomas Brush, and I am the creator of a game called Pinstripe. I'm also working on a game called Once Upon a Coma. And I'm actually working from this creepy basement here because me and my wife are currently building a new home, and there's also going to be a new studio there. So I'm in transition, forgive the creepy vibes. But let's talk about those three kinds of people that successful people surround themselves with. The first kind of person that most successful people I've ever come in contact with surround themselves with are creatively successful people. So people who surround themselves with creatively successful people typically get great ideas. They tend to be able to think outside of the box a little bit more, rather than surrounding yourself with people who are kind of squares, right? People who follow the rules, don't really have new, interesting ideas that maybe you've never thought about before. Now, the cool thing about creatively successful people, other than the fact that they can, give you new ideas, is that they can actually put themselves or put you on their shoulders. So if you think about it, if you live in a small town like me, I live in a small town of a bigger city, but where I've grown up, my hometown is a small town. It's been difficult for me to find creatively successful, like wildly creatively successful people in my sphere of influence. And so I always wondered, especially when I was a teenager, how am I going to find creatively successful people and learn from them and also, take advantage of those connections? Well, it's actually not that difficult now, especially with the way social media and technology is. You can send emails to pretty much anyone you want to get in contact with, just by searching their Twitter account and seeing if their email address is listed on the Twitter account. And a good way to do this is just, and you've probably heard this from my previous videos, but a good way to do this is just to simply ask them for their advice. Or even if you in your local sphere of influence, maybe at your school or your workplace, or maybe your church, or just the town you've grown up in, maybe you could just send a text message to people and just say, hey, I'd really like to learn from you. I'll pay for your lunch if you want to go get lunch with me this week. And I've done that a lot. I've reached out to people, told them I'd buy them a lunch, and I just want to learn from them. And it's crazy how not only did I learn a lot, but I also kind of came up with new ideas while talking to these individuals. And ultimately, they were willing, especially if I was friendly and especially if we sort of continued our relationship. It's crazy how they were willing to help me out in the future. And hopefully one day I'll be able to return the favor. All right, the second kind of person that successful people surround themselves with are, believe it or not, their enemies. Okay? You got to keep your enemies close. I don't know what quote that is. There's a quote that says that keep your enemies closer than your friends. And I've been trying to think about why this is true. And there's a lot of reasons, I think, but for me, personally, I used to not take criticism well. And to go even further, I didn't take bullying well, right? I mean, who really takes bullying well? But part of me thinks that it's really important to remember that most people at some point in their life get bullied. So it's not a good excuse to say, I'm getting bullied, no one else is, so I'm going to avoid bullies at all costs. I think especially when you get older and when you have a career, and maybe a career in the indie game industry or the game industry, in the AAA game industry, it's really competitive. And so you might come in contact with people who don't want you to succeed. And these might be bullies. So I would say learn to keep your enemies close and actually be intentional about keeping your enemies close. Keeping your bullies close. Practice being bullied. Practice taking negative energy and turning it into positive energy. I really like the idea, and I've actually kind of figured this out in the past year or two, especially after releasing Pinstripe on Steam. I really like the idea of almost working out, kind of like physically working out, getting stronger, but working out my mind and my heart and my conscience so that I'm able to take critique, so that I'm able to take maybe even mean comments and take them and not care, right? I think it's really important to grow a thick skin if you're in the game industry, especially, if you're in the indie game industry. Grow a thick skin because there are going to be comments out there. Excuse me, guys. There's going to be comments out there about your game, and you're going to need to learn to not avoid them, not run away from them, but take them in. Let them come in and listen to them, and then don't let them affect you. Don't let them hurt you. And I can honestly say, and I'm not a unself-aware person. I tend to be pretty introspective. I can honestly say in the past year I've grown leaps and bounds just by intentionally saying I'm going to be around people, and I'm going to read negative comments on YouTube or Steam or whatever. I'm going to intentionally keep those in my life and slowly learn how to have a thick skin and to be strong. I think that's really important in the indie game industry. All right, the third kind of person that a successful individual keeps in their life are, I can't think of a better word for this, so just go with me here for a second, but energy givers. Okay, I know that sounds woo-woo and kind of weird, but there's actually a term that was coined by some blogger. I read his book a while ago, and I loved the term. It was called energy vampires. And if any of you can think of who coined that term, leave a comment. But basically, there are energy vampires out there, and they're basically people who don't like to see you succeed, and they don't like you to pursue your dreams or pursue a passion, because maybe they're pursuing their passions and it's not actually working out for them and they're kind of jealous. Or maybe they're fundamentally opposed to the idea of pursuing their passions because they're mediocre individuals and they don't like anyone else to be not mediocre. Okay, so people like this will maybe passively say a negative comment. So they're a lot different than bullies, actually. I like to keep bullies close. I like to keep enemies close. Or at least that's my ideology, and I want to keep pursuing that. But the thing about energy vampires is they're not really bullies. They're actually people who are close to you, who might manipulate you into feeling bad about yourself. They might kindly say something, but really it's a terrible thing to say. Maybe saying something like, I didn't really see you as a video game developer. I always saw you as somebody who was more of a teacher. Or I always saw you as someone more of maybe like a mechanical engineer. Are you sure you're a creative person? Or why do you think that you can make games? Isn't that really difficult for people like you? That's an energy vampire. They suck the energy out of you and they make you want to just go lay down and go to sleep instead of actually working hard and pursuing your passions. I think who Jesus said, a common phrase from Jesus was, a prophet is not welcome in his hometown. Now, I'm not saying indie game developers are prophets. I'm not saying I'm a prophet. But I think you can apply that statement to this, which is in your small sort of, maybe within your family circle or your close friends circle, they know you as the 5-year-old who was picking his nose, right? They don't really know you as someone who's successful or someone who has a passion and wants to follow a dream. So I would just remember that if your family or people close to you aren't really seeing what you're seeing, they could be right, but there's probably a better chance that they might be wrong. And they're energy vampires, meaning they're kind of jealous, or they can't really see eye to eye with you about what you're passionate about. So rather than surrounding yourself with those kinds of people, which it's okay to be friends with them, it's okay to be close to your family, I would say it's more important to take advice and really take in information and conversations from energy givers, people who want to see you succeed. So a good example of this is maybe someone you're really close to who's known you all your life, but has followed you very closely and personally to kind of know every step of your career path and know which steps you've taken, which ones worked for you, which ones didn't. A good example in my case is my dad. My dad has been there from the very beginning. He's always encouraged me to follow my creative passions. And he actually was the one who pushed me to get into indie game development. He is not a game developer or a gamer himself, but he saw that would work for me. He knew me on a very deep core kind of level and pushed me to pursue that. So start with that one person, right? Who is that? Think about that one person right now. Who is an energy giver? Maybe it's a really close friend that you have at school or at work, and they always seem to encourage you, but they're honest, right? It's an interesting combination. You want to avoid people who lie to your face and tell you that you're an amazing singer, right? And then you end up on American Idol making a fool of yourself. But you also want to avoid people who genuinely, don't want to see you succeed. So a really good way to find out whether someone's actually being genuine with their critique and trying to help you versus an energy vampire who doesn't want you to succeed. A good way to sense this is to look and see if the person is competing with you. Do they have similar career paths or passions? I had a meeting one time with an illustrator, and I wanted to grow in friendship with him. And I kind of reached out to him, and we met, and we talked, and he was just very critical of my work. And it was more so than I would have expected, right? And come to find out, we were actually kind of competing with one another. I think he felt like he was competing with my art style, and honestly, I felt like I was competing with his art style. And he also kind of wanted to make games, I believe. And so I think he saw that I was making games and taking my illustrations further. And there might have been some jealousy there or confusion. So he was very critical. I went home and I spent like 2 hours sort of just confused, right? 2 hours, I think I was laying in bed, just kind of feeling really down, like, wow, I didn't know I was this bad. And I found out about 2 weeks later that he had actually told someone else that he was really impressed with my work, but he didn't want to tell me. That's an energy vampire, someone who might be jealous or competing with you. So look for people who are competing with you. And that's why I always say, and this goes back to number one, if you want to avoid the energy vampires altogether, hang out with the mentors. Hang out with the people who are better than you already. Hang out with the people who are more successful than you. Don't let the blind lead the blind, because the blind leading the blind are probably all going to be energy vampires, right? And I'll admit, I've been that before. I've been jealous, and I haven't really complimented someone when I really felt the urge to compliment them because I was jealous and I didn't want to let them succeed. So a good way to avoid this is just hang out with people who are older than you, who are more successful, or their careers are completely different, right? So my dad is an accountant, I'm a game developer, and we both encourage one another because we're not competing with one another. Or on the other side of the coin, a lot of my mentors are in the game industry, but they're like killing it, right? I'm kind of struggling a little bit here and there, trying to make ends meet or make games and fully understand what games, how games are successful, what makes a game not successful. Whereas my mentors, they figured it out, right? And they're not competing with me. So those are the three kinds of people. Again, creatively successful people, your enemies, and then also energy givers, people who want to help you succeed and see you succeed. Be intentional. Surround yourself with these kinds of people. And this is tough. This is really difficult because these kinds of people, it's actually really, I would say, challenging to, one, find these people, but two, have the courage to actually reach out and tell them that you want to be surrounded by them. It's a weird feeling to text somebody and say, I want to be your friend, right? I want to be around you. It's kind of like asking a girl on a date or something. It's really strange, but it's totally worth it. And I've heard this story over and over and over again of successful people reaching out to other people and just saying, hey, I want to learn from you. So anyway, my name is Thomas Brush. If you really like this video, please subscribe, hit the like button. I'm trying to hit, believe it or not, I'm trying to hit 100,000 subscribers by the end of 2019. I know that that's crazy, but I'm going to go for it. And I'm going to announce that publicly right now. So if you want to subscribe, please do. Also, I want to give a big shout out to my patrons. Thank you, Jeremy, Mike, Matthias, and Nate for supporting on Patreon. If you want to see your name splashed up on this screen in my next video, please head on over, support for $5. It helps me continue to make games. All right, guys, I'll see you later. Bye.